Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to this webinar on industrial sustainability, challenges, perspectives and actions. My name is Andreas Walter and I'm the Innovation Hub Officer here at the MCI of the Innovation Hub Biotechnology, Food and Circular Economy. This webinar is one of a series of Ulysses webinars taking place frequently and hosted by the Innovation Hubs. If you have missed one or more of these preliminary webinars, you will find a link of the whole series in our YouTube chat. And follow us on social media or go to Ulysses EU. This webinar is also embedded into the MCI Sustainability Week, an event to raise awareness for sustainable actions. You will find the link to this event as well as in the chat. Generally speaking, sustainability management refers to the practice of integrating sustainable practices and principles into the operation and decision-making process of an organization. It aims to minimize negative environmental impacts, promote social responsibility, and ensure long-term economic viability. Today, I warmly welcome three experts in their respective fields of sustainable management. First, Dominik. Dominik Kohnthaler is working as a consultant, course leader, and trainer in the fields of sustainability and waste management. He gathered work experience in the academic, industrial, and non-profit sector, and was involved in many national and international projects on circular economy, waste management, and sustainability. Then Lisa Scharinger. She's working as an energy and environmental manager at AMAC, Austria Metall GmbH. She studied here at the MCI biotechnology and is now dealing with environmental and engineer management, as well as life cycle assessment calculations. She's also part of different sustainable projects like the EU taxonomy regulations. Last but not least, Ilya Moric. He is an assistant professor at the Faculty of Tourism and Hotel Management at University of Montenegro. His main areas of teaching and research are social impacts of tourism, entrepreneurship, ethics, and social responsibility, as well as hotel management. And apart from scientific research, he has made certain results as an entrepreneur in the sector of organic production and the development of tourism products. All three experts will allow insights into their daily business regarding sustainable management. In between and at the end of all three talks, there will be space for questions, so please don't hesitate to type and write into the chat. We will forward these questions to the speakers thereafter. But now, prick your ears and dive deeper into the matter of sustainability, challenges, perspectives, and actions. I stop now sharing my screen and hand over to Dominik. So Dominik, you may share your screen. Should work now.
Should work.
Yes, perfect.
You should see it already.
Yeah, fine.
Just one moment. I need to use my cheat notes so I see what I talk about. Okay, hello folks. Thank you for the welcoming words to Andreas. I am an independent consultant working in the area. And I wanted to give you a deeper insight into two organizations' way towards a sustainability future during the last decade. However, then these organizations heard that this is going to be presented on YouTube. They reminded me on my NDA and said it's okay for a lecture in the lecture hall, but it won't be okay for YouTube. So what I did is I generalized examples from my knowledge and my experience during the last 10 years. And to begin with, I wanted to give you a few basics about sustainability through the ages. Some of it Some of you might know about this, some may not. Maybe you hear something new, or it can be a basis for discussion. To begin with, I'd like you, my dear audience, now to undergo a self-quiz. The questions I present you should be answered for yourself without Google and just following your gut feeling. And remember the answers throughout my presentation and the presentation of the following speakers. First, when was the concept of sustainability first applied in the framework of economic thinking? Before, during, or after the 20th century? Question 2. What is sustainability about? Is it about the habit of suitable for grandchildren living that we would undergo on our present Earth? Is it about environmental protection, or should it be about non-renewable resources? And the third question, what is the importance of sustainability in the economic framework of the 21st century? Keep the answers to your heart, remember them, discuss them, and now follow me through a short or nutshell description of the evolution of sustainability. When one talks about the development of sustainable ideas, you have to go quite far back. If it is the beginning of mankind or the species of Earth, of our humans, that might be a question to answer. But there is one publication in the history of our world that first named sustainable procedures. And it was made by Karl of Karlowitz in the 18th century. You might have heard of him or not. He first framed the word nachhaltig agieren, which means use the resources, especially on the German forestation back then, in a sustainable way in order to provide the necessary wood for heating, cooking, building, and also for the very important mining industry back then, which was the basis of the wealth of the German Empire in the 18th century after the 30 Years' War. During the next decades, not much happened until the 70s of the 20th century. And then it was the Club of Rome who stated in their Limits of Growth publication an idea of how to use resources in a more or less sustainable way in order to prevent future economic systems to strive as well as the current one. This actually was the basis for the first environmental laws, especially in Austria. The first real waste law was based upon the suggestions from the Club of Rome meeting in the late 70s of the 20th century. And then this person might be might be very, very famous for guys and girls who are into the topic of sustainability. It's Gro Harlem Brundtland, and she was the leader of the United Nations Organization project on our common future, which first described the 3 pillars of sustainability to be a balanced mix between socio-economical and environmental topics. In the course of the development of new technologies, we sometimes forgot about sustainability, and therefore we had an evolution of convenience. And this evolution of convenience is strongly based upon energy. So the production of energy enabled us to make the world smaller, to globalize ourselves. We can communicate, we can travel, we can light our nights, we can work all day. And those convenience things sometimes kicked down sustainability patterns during the last couple of 100 years, actually. Nevertheless, during the course of the last 310 years, new ideas, laws, strategies, products, and services arose around sustainability processes. And nevertheless, it was non-sustainable thinking that made itself to the leader in our minds. And this is throwaway living. You might have seen this picture. It originates from the Life magazine somewhere mid of the 50s of the last century. It was titled Throwaway Living. And the article combined to it was not about be careful with resources, but throw away stuff after one usage, because it is more convenient to throw things away than to clean them and reuse them. And then you have time for the more important stuff like go shopping or even spend time with your family. That were the commercials back then. And that is what you still see in TV shows nowadays. And that led to, well, 2-generation development in our minds that throwing away things is good. And keeping things and reuse them is something our grandparents did during the war. But now we don't have these issues. We strive and prosper, and therefore it's okay to throw away things. And there might be another issue or obstacle in the way of sustainability implementation, even into economy, politics, and social minds. And that is our species' ability to forecast things. This is a nice picture. I found it at Mackay's, and he makes really nice cartoons. And this one is great. It shows that current obstacle like COVID-19 can produce a situation where almost all governments and people on this continent, on this planet actually, work together in order to reduce the bad impacts of this pandemic to our society. But things like climate change or the adhered biodiversity collapse and even the collapse of the food web, of the global food web, they are not easy to grasp for many people. So they are far away. They are far away on the horizon, and we don't see them actually threatening us. So we don't care much about them. And with this into your minds, I want to sum up the first part of this very short presentation. I'll try to keep it short. And as the biologist, want to end it with the following words. I wrote them down, for my English is not so good and I might make mistakes when I not read it. So it's all about resources. All life forms share one thing like no other, and that's the need for resources to metabolize. It's an input-output question, actually. And when you think on industrial processes, they too metabolize in a way. Resources go in, side and waste products go out, and in the end, you have an ending product you can work with. And to reach a suitable for grandchildren scenario, we have to realize, actually we have to accept that we live in a world dependent on non-renewable resources. Through the ages, sustainability might be part of our economic and industrial thinking. However, crisis, wars, lust for power, and many other obstacles stood and still stand in the way of an unconditional implementation. And if you work in these fields or in the area of sustainable developments, of sustainability development in organizations, you have frameworks like the SDGs, like the circular economy and European Green Deals, but you also have a mindset from 2-generation throwaway living against you. And to break up this mindset is very important to find cooperations and bring people together to work for the greater good. I worked in the field of sustainable consulting for a little more than a decade now. I started on an association basis. So I founded and ran an association concerned with sustainable development and mainly with educational processes. And a friend of mine who is still working for one of the larger consulting companies in Europe and actually worldwide, back then in 2013 was working with logistic companies. And she asked me to join her because she needed someone who can make educational speeches for those companies in order to explain why it is important to invest in environmental protection and sustainability. So we were considered with the 300-year anniversary of Karlov Karlowitz's Silvicultura Economica, and therefore it was an anniversary year with a lot of projects going on in and out Austria, actually in and out the European Union. In the transportation sector, there is a strong need for transportation, of course. And this transportation back then and now is mainly based on carbonized fuels like fossil fuels, for instance. We discussed circular economy principles and what the European Union back then had in mind when it was about sustainability. We further discussed how to achieve those things in Austria, Germany, and Switzerland. And we knew that those organizations had lots of money. So it would even be possible to maybe reach a change of technical foundation from them. And then we faced the obstacle. Those organizations back then did not have the wish to become green or sustainable. They wanted to become greenish or greenwashed maybe. So they wanted to have a way or an option to pretend that what they do is green. And there's one thing I have not done and will not do, and that is greenwashing. So I'm always for transparency. And some of the companies let me go back then already. Others worked with me further, and others I still follow. What happened? We talked about different approaches for them to gain a sustainability or sustainable way of working. Technical, social, and infrastructural ways were easily communicated, and within the companies we could initialize, for example, waste separation processes. We could also do something in the way of greening the roofs or of implementing renewable energy forms for their office buildings, at least. Why did I list environmental management systems in orange? Well, they are management system. They do not make you sustainable or environmental friendly. What they do is help you managing your environmental behavior. And managing is always depending on the direction you are given from your leadership level. And if the leadership level says everything is good, we just need to set some targets in our EMAS or in our ISO. They are not really that strong differing. Then nothing much will happen. It's just about the self-organization. So an environmental management system is very good to help you track your endeavors, but it is not a guarantee that you as an organization or corporate is be sustainable. For instance, a coal company producing coals can have an ISO certification or even an AMAS management certification if they behave in the right way. So it's not a seal. For me, personal e-fuels are a big issue because they lead to the misunderstanding that we can further burn stuff in order to produce energy. Actually, we do this since a couple of 100 years. We burn coal or wood in order to produce heat or in order to produce vape steam out of water, and then we produce energy with this steam. And it does not matter if we use coal, wood, or if we apply nuclear reactions, it's always the same. We heat up water and we produce energy out of it. We have become very good in this. And if you think on it, nature, primary production, the biologist Miles Merkel already works with solar energy for millions, for billions of years, using the most effective energy source in the whole, in our whole solar system. And we still burn sticks. We fight with sticks still, so something's going wrong in the technical development of our species, but that's a different issue. Between 2013 and 23, a lot of things happened. In 2013, many companies invested in PR and marketing, and they used around 75% of their so-called going green budget. So instead of investing in their infrastructure or in finding and supporting new ways of becoming greener, some of them, not all, of course. So there are goods, there are bads, and there are the intermediates. I took out the bads for this, of course. And they invested in marketing, in commercials that say, we are green. And no matter what we do, you need us, and you have to accept that we need carbonized transportation. They paid a lot for those advertising and commercial and marketing. Now, many of those companies who invested in marketing mainly invest in law companies or law departments in order to find loopholes in the EU and Austrian laws in order to get grants and fundings. And I personally don't think that's the right way. I think these laws need to be made so firm that you cannot find loopholes. And from the ethical standing point on, I deem companies who find loopholes and behave in a way they did 50 years ago already, nowadays, it's just not okay. It's not sustainable, but it is something one can work with. In Austria, the system shifted. We had a very strong NGO and association-based sustainability process in 2013. So the state and governmental sustainability projects were ambitious, but they were not connected. You had the waste management development, you had the environmental protection department, you had the social department, you had the health department. All of them had single projects going on, aiming into the same direction, but those projects did not intercross, they did not cooperate. And this is a problem still in the sustainability movement. You have a lot of single and individual players who do good things and good stuff, but they forget that only the cooperation makes the whole thing working. And that is at least highlighted or at least hinted in the circular economy ideas of the European Union. Cooperation is very important. Therefore, I'm quite happy to see now, 2023, that it's not only NGO-based and association-based. Universities, big state and governmental departments, and also other big corporate players partly have started to take sustainability serious during the last 10 years. This webinar is a good example. 10 years ago, a lecture about sustainability might have attracted 20 or maybe 30 people in a city. There were frameworks or connections over the world, but it was not a real thing for many. You were an idealist if you participated in such things. You were not meant to be at a management center back then. I actually had conversations with NCI back then about those things, but that's a different kind of story I may share in an evening maybe. Logistic companies back then and nowadays have a lot of money, and to change the technical foundation would be possible. And the answer of most of the companies is sure, when there are funds, sure, when we receive something from the EU, but we cannot use our money for it. That have to be sure. We cannot start it on our own. And this is understandable from the consultant point of view, from the economic thinking, it is absolutely understandable. But if you really take sustainability and sustainable processes serious, you might have to give away some parts of your winnings and see it as investment into future technologies. Some do, some don't, and some are in between and not sure what to do yet. Yeah, back then some of them wanted to have greenwashing. I said, I won't do this. I offered them an alternative, and I said, well, you might finance projects of, for example, associations or NGOs, and those projects might be even tax deductible. It is okay, so a project can be financed. I just see, I will take 1 to 3 more minutes if that is somehow possible. I'm a little over the 20, sorry for that. Tax deduction of financing projects is okay. My personal opinion is it is not fair, because if an organization finances a project with parts of their revenues before taxes, and then can deduct those revenue from the tax, it is actually the taxpayer or the taxpayer or the state financing those projects, and not the company itself, because they receive the money back in a way, or don't have to pay taxes for that amount of money. So I don't see exactly why it is okay for companies to finance projects, get the money back from the taxes, and then can write a name on something. It is okay. So you get financing, but you should at least communicate it. Now, many of them have internal projects. They are running quite well. So you have an internal change in the companies. That is not the last, but the last before the last. And it is a different example. It is going about food production and delivery services. I worked in these fields as a consultant and university researcher between 2019 and 2020. 22 and 3. And it was mainly about reuse and, of course, the need for decarbonized transportation. So a big issue with all those sustainability concepts is plastic. Plastic enables our society to be what we are. Without plastics, we wouldn't be where we are. But plastics brings a lot of issues. On the one hand is plastic waste that is non-treatable because we don't have the technical approaches to deal with the sheer amount of the waste, and it brings inherent problems in the micro and nanobead problems. So there was a willingness to change from single-use plastic to reuse plastics, and there was also the willingness to use public funding for pilot projects in order to make a change, transition to more sustainable ways. Money is not an issue for the food producing sector and even not for the pre-prepared delivery sector. And therefore, I was happy to see that there's a strong wish to become sustainable. And that was quite nice. What happened during the last decade is that the transportation of food in the pre-prepared sector switched from carbonized to at least electrical powered transport devices, and that reuse was initially implemented on a pilot basis. There are still reuse organizations out there who use reusable plastics mainly for pre-prepared foods, but there is also a strong need for single-use packaging. And the reason for that is that most of the players in the reuse sector are not cooperating. And that's the same issue we had in the whole sustainability field 10 to 15 years ago. Now, since 3 years, the reuse sector is growing, a lot of startups out there, and each of them try to invent the wheel another time instead of working together and use experiences made. And that's an issue because you will only have a positive life cycle assessment of reuse if you provide a large setup. Summing up, the issues for this sector were the expectations in making the organizations more sustainable, they were too high. It was expected within 1 year of transition time, everything would be fine, but that didn't work out. You might know that if you're at the management sector, or if you have management and project management in your back, if you want to really change a system that has a certain size of employees and technical solutions behind, you will need a minimum time of 3 to 4 years to make a real transition. If you stop it earlier, you don't have usable data for anything to say. And pity, many of those companies nowadays invest in big legal and HR departments instead of implementing sustainability on leadership or decision-making basis. What Andreas just was saying in the introduction, that would be perfect. Sustainability on leadership hierarchy, on leadership levels, leadership, of course, levels. And sometimes it's just not. And with the last slide, briefly summing up an organization of the manufacturing occupation, mainly single-use products. They make billions of revenues a year. And to produce something out of the convenience sector that is produced to be thrown away within days, maybe weeks of usage, it cannot be sustainable, not per definition. Further, the resources needed are non-renewable. So sustainability just does not fit. 4 to 5 people work in the sustainability department of this organization in 2019. And the main activity was communication and searching for awards that have a framework. This company, nevertheless, they produce single-use products out of non-renewable resources, can participate in and then be awarded to be the most sustainable in a certain way of industry. And that's not okay in my opinion, but that's the way it works. As long as it is legal, you can do it. The internet nowadays won't forget. And now you have Fridays for Future. It's the 15, the 16, the 70-year-olds now. But companies out there, remember, in 10 to 15 years, those 15 to 17-year-olds will be the most, how you say it, the strongest customers of your products and services in the future. And the internet will not forget what you did back then. And in 15 years, your customers will remember and they might switch to something different. So keep that in mind when you design sustainability approaches. The sustainability department in this company, of course, was a part of the marketing and PR department, which is the case quite often, or it used to be. It changes a lot. Many organizations, especially corporates, start to implement sustainability decisions in their leadership levels, for they have understood that is the new way to go. Nevertheless, back then they had over 100 people in their legal department. So to talk about the significance of sustainability in the 21st century in an industrial or economic way, just compare the 4 to 5 people with the 100 people in the legal department to know about the significance, at least the one it had. It's becoming better, and I hope all of you will be a part of it. If you have questions or discuss something further after this webinar, visit me on my LinkedIn or on my homepage. I don't use LinkedIn very much, so don't be afraid, it's not updated very often, but I will come back to messages. Thank you very much, and I will now switch off my presentation.
Thanks, Dominic, for the historical excursion, and also for this, for the insight into this two concrete examples. I think there are quite a lot of steps to go in the future for a lot of companies.
Yeah, there might be. I hope they were abstract enough. Well, I will receive answer, I'm afraid of. We'll see.
Just one question, because I'm totally in line with you that the companies have to invest their own budget, their own money. Mm-hmm. But I think there are a lot of opportunities of the Green Deal, the European Green Deal. And my question is, what steps should business persons, entrepreneurs go to get something from this cake, to get budget for a green transition, for instance?
Yeah.
Where to start?
It's as a society, the question is not where but when. Mm-hmm. That was yesterday, and until time travel is made, I'd suggest you start in kindergartens and elementary schools to teach about sustainability and to talk about sustainable processes. So there's a strong need to understand the background of ecological strategies like food web connections, like the things are connected with each other, and that the resources that are non-renewable are somehow the basis for all life forms on Earth, and that especially we as a species will suffer if we use them up. The first question you stated was the how to participate in the cake. Well, the European Green Deal, like many political endeavors, is not easy to follow. It's a quite complex thing. There are a lot of different possibilities to get either loans or grants or even fundings. So it depends strongly on what you want to do, on what you are, which part of industry or economy you belong to. Are you like the Austrian metal company we hear now about in the, I guess, partly manufacturing way or industry part? Sorry, I received an email that blocked everything. Now it goes. You might consider which parts of your organization, which is big ones, you will change. Is it the energy, for example? So during the last years, the Repower European Union, for example, has offered new ways of investing in renewable energy production. Just for instance, there are a lot of them. You find a lot of those things among EU action, and then you go for funding for climate actions. You find a lot of the programs and funding programs there. Horizon Europe was one. I think you might remember. I'm not sure, but I think you had a project going on with Horizon Europe, or you wanted to.
We submitted one recently, yeah.
And there are other projects like the LIFE program. Maybe Ilya can talk about this, or will name it anyway, because it is one that is in the tourism sector, for instance. And you heard about the European Union taxonomy, or you mentioned it already. And the taxonomy, for instance, opens the possibility to receive loans in the future only if you fulfill certain requirements. I'm not sure how far this is going already. Maybe Lisa knows about it. You mentioned it before. And this is part of the Invest European Union plan. And there you can see what projects are funded, what cornerstones are needed, what are the requirements. But as I stated, most of them would need cooperations with universities or with educational programs. And then you receive funding for pilot projects. If you really want to get, if you really want to change a lot, you might need loans. There's a lot of money out there. And then you have to apply for them. And therefore you have to fulfill requirements. As much. Yeah.
Great, thanks again, Dominic. And just a reminder to the audience, dear audience, there will be also space for questions after all the talks. So keep on going, typing into your computer, please. And so we call up for the next speaker, which is Lisa Scharinger. Lisa, the stage is yours, please.
Yeah, so I have to be not muted. So hi everybody, also from my side, and thank you, Andreas, for introducing me. I hope you can hear and see the screen. As before mentioned, I'm working for the AMAC group, and in the next few minutes, I'm going to talk about the sustainability at AMAC, at the industry. And especially, I want to give you an insight into topics that concern me and my profession. So first, I'm going to introduce the company, that you know what we are doing, and further I take the focus on the sustainability, which is one central pillar of our company's strategy. And it includes, for our department, the topics of the climate neutrality, the recycling, the CO2 footprint calculation, and also parts of the transparent yearly reporting. So AMAC is located with its headquarters in Ranshofen. It's in Upper Austria, and you can see the site in the first picture. I'm also talking to you from this site. And at Ranshofen, at this site, we produce firstly recycled cast alloys, so out of aluminium, and these are delivered to the manufacturing industry in form of ingots and saws. Later on, you will see a picture to better imagine how this looks like. And also liquid aluminium is manufactured on site. Secondly, at Ranshofen, we produce rolled products in the form of sheets, coils, or plates. And these products are deployed in very different industrial sectors, such as in the aircraft, the automotive, the packaging, the sports, or also the architecture. The AMAC also holds a 20% interest in the Canada's Alouette smelter, which is the largest smelter in North and South America, and shown in the second picture on the slide. And with the AMAC components at the two sites in Germany, in Übersee am Chiemsee and Karlsruhe, the AMAC group has extended its value chain more in the direction of the mechanical processing and the manufacturing of special components. So in the diagram on the next page, you can see the whole aluminium value chain from the crell to the gate. And the value chain starts from the bauxite mining to the primary aluminium production, and then the manufacturing of semi-finished products, and the recycling is shown in the cycle on the right-hand side. And our business model of AMAC is colored in blue in the chain, and it starts, even mentioned, with the production of the primary aluminium at the Canadian smelter. Then the recycled cast alloys and aluminium rolled products are produced at the site in Ranshofen, and these products then are supplied to a wide variety of industries for further manufacturing. And the bundled recycling expertise, which I also will come to later, And Ranshofen enables us to return aluminium scrap and the production waste to the production process, which you can see in the closed loop. This makes a significant contribution to our sustainable production, and therefore you should know that aluminium can be recycled as often as required without any loss of the quality and thereby be retained in the material cycle. And of course, this saves a lot of amounts of energy and valuable raw materials. And recycling aluminium can in fact save up to 95% of the energy compared to the primary aluminium production. Next, I will go on with the strategy of AMAC, which is based on 4 pillars, and sustainability is one major pillar of it. And in our sustainability program, different targets are set, and they have clear goals and measures, which comes from the management board. So you can see the 6 spheres of action, which are summarized in the compass on the right-hand side. And the 2 overarching objectives of the goals are reducing the footprint and creating shared values. So the spheres of action, the 6 points in the middle, are in relation to the ESG criteria, the environmental, social, and governance criteria. And these ESG criteria and other relevant regulations and goals exist in the area of sustainability, and ESG, for example, refers to a set of rules to assess sustainable practices of companies. And on the slide I'm showing now, another example is shown with the SDGs. I think Dominic mentioned them before, and they cover the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And these goals are to a sustainable future and also part of the UN Global Compact, which is one of the biggest and most important initiatives for responsible corporate governance. The stated goals on the slide are within the sphere of influence of our company, of the AMAC group, and they cover, for example, as you can see, the climate action, life on land, the peace, or gender equality. And back to the spheres of the sustainability compass, I want to point out the responsible corporate management. And this comprises the responsible treatment of people and organizations involved in the development of the company and the responsible, legally compliant and morally correct conduct of the business activities. And there are different legal and voluntary obligations as basis, which include the listed points, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the ILO, the OECD, for example, or the UN Guiding Principles and the UN Global Compact. Then I want to go further in the next 2 slides with the topics which describe our company's sustainable actions, what we are doing in the field of sustainability. For example, 2 years ago in 2021, AMAC built Austria's largest rooftop photovoltaic plant on the roofs of the new rolling mill. You can see a part of it on the left picture, and it covers about 60,000 square meters, and which is an equivalent to about 9 football pitches, to better imagine the size of the photovoltaic plant. The electricity generated is used directly on the site at AMAC, and electricity supplements the electricity mix at the site in Ranshofen, which has been 100% from renewable energy sources for several years now. And also, for a better imagination, the energy requirement of about 2,000 households could be covered with this amount the photovoltaic system generates in 1 year. AMAC is also, as you can see, pursuing the zero waste to landfill objective. And here is a particular focus placed on the waste prevention and the disposal of hazardous waste. And another point is the implementation of a sustainable rainwater management, for several years now. Is it working at Ranshofen? And for this purpose, several seepage basins and throws have been constructed on the working site. And as an example, you can see such a basin and through on the right picture. To complete the sustainability approach of AMAC, I want to mention the more than 40 years of experience in recycling, and the average scrap utilization rate of AMAC is between 75 to 80%. So AMAC Ranshofen is one of the biggest scrap recyclers at a single site in Europe, and it processes all scrap types available on the market and then creates high quality specialties in different products. So through this closed loop concepts, optimal resource utilization, as before, should be mentioned, because 95% of energy can be saved when you recycle aluminium instead of using primary. And also noted on the slide, AMAC commits to the climate neutrality and outlines therefore an own path to the decarbonization, which I want to show you a bit more in the next slide. So with the decarbonization roadmap, which was also implemented in 2021, we set ourselves the goal to achieve the carbon neutrality. And the approach of AMAC to the decarbonization consists of the 3 stages of first the recycling, the energy efficiency, and then the substitution. So the recycling forms the basis for the manufacturing of products with low carbon emission, as this replaces, as I mentioned before, the carbon-intensive primary aluminum production. The second stage, the energy efficiency, should be increased, and thereby less energy should be used for the same energy service. And for the last and remaining carbon emissions, the third stage should substitute the fossil energy sources with climate neutral alternative energy. So this energy transformation, step 3, represents one of the major challenges of the coming years, because we, of course, use a lot of natural gas in our cast houses to remelt the aluminium. And you see the drawn path on the next page to the climate neutral AMAC. And as I mentioned, the key element is the substitution of fossil energy sources, and thereby also the electricity production plays a big role. The leap from the years 2017 to 2018 on the axis shows the change to the 100% renewable electricity. So our scope 2 emissions are 0, and further actions need to be done and defined to achieve this goal until 2030 or 2050. 2050 is the goal of the EU climate neutrality, and Austria aims for the neutrality by 2040. And actions that need to be done are also shown on the slide. They cover extensive research activities, improved energy efficiency measures, also adjustments to the plant infrastructure, and most importantly, the substitution of the fossil fuels. And this will require a lot of investments in the plant park, as they will be or will have to be converted for the use of alternative energy sources, or also entirely new plants will have to be procured. And another essential component of the path to the climate neutrality is that the required quantities of the green electricity and the green fuels, for example, as hydrogen, that they are provided by external suppliers. So it's kind of challenging for the next few years. On the next slide, as Dominic mentioned before, of course, we are also having some external evaluations, which are a big part, especially for customer requirements. And on this slide, I want to show you a summary of some important external evaluations. of our sustainability activities. Of course, we are proud of them. And I want to pick, especially in the field, the achievements in the latest ratings of the platinum score in the EcoVadis rating and the low risk rating of the Sustainalytics. With this rating, we achieved the low risk rating, and we achieved the first place in the category aluminium sub-industry. So as Andreas mentioned before, I'm handling a lot of CO2 footprint calculation. The CO2 footprint is a big key performance indicator and is very interesting for our customers also. So we map and measure the CO2 emissions along our cradle to gate production chain and cover all the 3 scope emissions. So the scope 1 emissions, for a short explanation, they arise from energy-based utilization of, for example, natural gas for the melting, for the holding, the heat treatment of aluminium, and also for the heating of buildings or of the use of diesel for the vehicle fleet. And scope 2 emissions, as I mentioned before, include the indirect emissions, and they are 0 at the site Ranshofen, because we purchase only renewable electricity since 2018. And the scope 3 emissions, they include all other greenhouse gas emissions caused by our company's upstream operating activities. And regarding the calculation, I was part of a team last year to achieve the certification to prove that we are calculating it correctly. We achieved the certification by the standard you can see on the show, and in case of the preparation for the certification, we had to implement a study about the framework and also the calculation methodology. And now I will come to my last slide, and I want to give you an insight into one of the core sustainability management things, which is the non-financial statement of AMAC, and it is part of the AMAC financial report. And as Dominic mentioned before, transparent reporting is very important, and this transparent reporting of sustainability at AMAC is prepared in accordance with the Global Reporting Initiative, the Sustainability and Diversity Improvement Act, and also out of the regulation of the European Union taxonomy. The key issues I listed on the slide are, for example, energy and emissions, the innovation, recycling and raw materials. All these chapters you will find in the sustainability financial report. And especially the chapter energy and emissions concern me in calculating the relevant key performance indicator, as the slide before mentioned. So another big topic regarding this communication last year was the implementation of the European Union taxonomy reporting. So this taxonomy follows the objective of the Green Deal. It's a regulation and describes a framework to classify sustainable economic activities. And the motivation of the regulation is to channel investments into sustainable activities in order to achieve the goals and targets of the European Union. And according to the taxonomy regulation, an economic activity is considered as compliant if it makes a significant contribution to at least one of a total 6 defined environmental objectives without harming the others. So there had to be a do no significant harm analysis made. And at the same time, there must be certain minimum requirements met, such in relation to human rights and so on. And why I'm mentioning it, it's because the implementation of the EU taxonomy reporting was one of the really big challenges last year in my field. And I was a member of the team of an internal working group consisting of really different departments that we had to work together. And we had to deal with the implementation and handling of the requirements of this regulation. And this year it should be a bit easier because we know what is happening and what we should write and what we should know and define. And we have implemented our own company standard, but the regulation is steady updated, and thus it will be, of course, again, a challenge for us. So to sum it all up, sustainability for us as a company is quite demanding and very interesting. I learned, and the requirements for the sustainability management and also the communication have changed significantly in the recent years. So the customer requirements, as I mentioned, and the legal developments are forcing the transformation away from the marketing, as Dominic also mentioned before, to a scientifically based discipline. And you have to be in accordance with a lot of different international standards. So I'm really happy to have the opportunity to give you a short insight in the companies and the sustainability at AMAC. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask.
Thanks, Lisa. It's always very exciting to get these insights into these big companies like AMAC is. I was wondering, just one short question, what is the most urgent task for AMAC at the moment? And maybe a second one, what is mostly time consuming for you at the moment? So where are you deeply involved? Is it the same task or is it a different one?
There are many different tasks which are quite time consuming. My daily workflow is filled in with the, as I mentioned, LCR calculation, and also with new regulations by the European Union or also Austria. For example, I work with the chemical regulations. They are quite demanding and changing, and it's everything based on the EU Green Deal. So this is the big topic to be prepared for the next several years.
Great. Thank you again. And just a reminder to the audience, dear audience, don't be shy. If there are questions, type in the chat. And our last speaker of today's webinar, Ilya Moric. Please, Ilya, go on.
Hello, everybody. I think it's okay, yeah? So, thank you very much for this opportunity to be part of this project, and also thank you for opportunity to talk about the service part or service industry, such as tourism industry. In the previous two presentations, we heard a lot about sustainability, but now I would like to give you a short insight in the situation that we have in Montenegro. So I come from Faculty of Tourism and Hotel Management. That's part of the University of Montenegro. It's a public body. Faculty is in Kotor, in Boka Bay, one maybe of among the 25 most beautiful bays in the world. So I would like to give you to show you some issues that we are dealing with in terms of sustainability and especially sustainable development of tourism. But first of all, we can't discuss about sustainable development of tourism, avoiding general sustainability of the society and ecology and economy as one integral system. My presentation, I will try to be as short as possible to fit into 15 minutes or maybe 20. So I would like to give a short introduction, then give a few definitions about sustainable tourism according to United Nations World Tourism Organization. Then I would like to also mention sustainable development goals that already were mentioned, but in terms of tourism development. And then I will approach to something maybe more interesting for you, I mentioned I come from Montenegro, and Montenegro is a developing country. Previously, we heard some experiences from mostly developed countries, but I would like to give you some insight into what we are dealing with in our still transitional economy and developing situation. So I would like to give you two insights. First one is from the point of view of sustainable position paradigm changed business models as something that maybe we can define as a macro level of some experiences that we have in terms of tourism, and the other micro level, microeconomic level, for example, I'm talking about sustainable product and process innovations that are now maybe on in Montenegro in case of development certain new experiences. And of course, finally, I would like to give some guidelines in terms of tourism development, but as I mentioned, in sense of some general sustainability. Sustainability principles, as you already know, refer to environmental, economic, and socio-cultural aspects of tourism development. But what is more interesting, it's actually that these principles are applicable to all forms of tourism in all types of destinations, including mass tourism and other various niche tourism segments. This is according UNWTO, and it's maybe it could sound paradoxal in sense that even these principles could be applied for mass tourism that is usually referred to over tourism that is maybe occupying the most of the coastal Mediterranean part with many negative impacts. But the truth is that actually principles that are referred to environmental, economic, and social cultural aspects actually could, and I would like to show you some examples what we are doing in Montenegro in terms of destination management. First definition: sustainable tourism should number one, make optimal use of environmental resources, and of course maintain essential ecological process and conserve natural heritage and biodiversity. Of course, we start with this ecological aspect. Then number two, it has to respect the socio-cultural authenticity of host community. And in the following slides, I would like to show you some experiences designed in order to protect and to promote and valorize host community via handcraft, agriculture, organic production, and other similar activities. And last but not the least, ensure viable long-term economic operations. Maybe most important is long-term economic operations, because mass tourism is often considered that it's maybe sustainable, but in short term, and that could be a great challenge. What we need, actually, we need long-term economic operations, providing, of course, benefits to all stakeholders. You probably heard about the big project that's called Tourism for All, because from tourism can benefit certain stakeholders, but that's not sustainable. We need that all stakeholders involved in tourism business and society need to have certain benefits. Of course, this is already mentioned. I will just also mention. So we know about sustainable development goals. There are 17 of them, and of course they are from all aspects quite important. We can't say that one is more important than the other, starting from no poverty to partnership for the goals that actually gives us a piece of advice how to actually manage all these, I believe, quite complex processes. And maybe now the most for you, for the audience, exciting part, it's actually Montenegro experiences. I already mentioned, I would like to show you from two aspects, from macro and micro level. First one is this position and paradigm changed business models. In theory, that could be rebranding as green, but not greenish, as as already mentioned. So we don't need green, we don't want a greenwashing, and maybe in theory also well-known servitization, like in sense that moving from manufacturing to service emphasizes this. In tourism, that's applicable in sense of agrotourism, or how now it's well known as agritainment, where agriculture is the production part, but agritainment as a new experience economy is part of this changed paradigm business model. I will tell few words more in the following slides. Second aspect is this micro level, maybe could be called product and process innovations, like again green products and like service models replacing ownership models, novel processes and others. But let's see what we have. From this position of paradigm models, did you know that in 1991, the Montenegrin authorities adopted the declaration by which the country became the first ecological state in the world? That was a great idea. Unfortunately, things that happened during 90s in ex-Yugoslavia stopped most of these projects and most of all this paradigm and this idea. But this idea is still on, and we believe that we as a small country, we can, a small and beautiful country where tourism is playing quite an important role, we still have strength to manage this beautiful idea. Did you know that in 2016, the government of Montenegro adopted the National Strategy for Sustainable Development till 2030, which of course sets out the principles, strategic goals and measures for achieving the long-term sustainable development. So these are some strategic approaches or models that are very important to mention. On the other side, but the same idea, National Tourism Organization together with the ministry, they are funding the introduction of environmental certificates, travel, life and EU eco-label, in partnership with the UNDP, and quite important for the accommodation industry, accommodation part, first of all hotels, but also for other providers of tourism services and products. Of course, spreading environmental awareness among the staff and guests is the goal of all eco-hotels. So one of the main goals in the new strategy of tourism development is actually dedicated to development of eco-hotels, eco-lodge, eco-accommodations, or green accommodation that actually are symbol of sustainability in tourism in some way. Finally, with a smart policy of redirecting tourism investments to the north, adequate waste disposal and adequate response to all the challenges posed by mass tourism, Montenegro protects the environment and builds tourism on principles of sustainability. Of course, in the last slides, I will give you some not so nice issues because we are dealing also with certain problems in sense of waste disposal. Also, we are dealing with certain problems in sense of over-tourism. One fact that's quite problematic for Montenegro, over 96, I repeat, 96% of our arrivals, tourism arrivals are concentrated on the coast, at the coastal part. So that's actually is creating a lot of troubles for the infrastructure, for the employability, and causing on the other side some poverty and other negative effects in the other part of Montenegro, mostly north part of Montenegro. On the other side, this was these few slides, 3-4 slides were about the macro level. Now I would like to give you some micro level of something that's called product and process innovations. So these are actually something that's promoted on our official website, montenegro.travel. So you are more than welcome to visit the site and also visit Montenegro. But for example, this in the last few years, there is this accent and focus on organic production, organic producers, villages, eco-villages, and this is one of the response and some kind of solution for poverty and for revitalization of the rural economies that probably in the whole Europe are dealing with the same problems in sense of demography or social and cultural problems in general. Second, meet the makers, from craft beer to replica cold steel to wooden boats, olive oil and other craftsmanships. It's actually, this is part of that principle of sustainability that protects the host community, especially the creative part of host community. So on this link, you can find different experiences that actually in the same way promote, in some way protect and valorize craftsmanships in local communities, mostly rural communities. And that's I believe, quite important for Montenegro, because on the other side, most of the tourism is still happening in urban zones. So we, of course, need to redirect certain part of that visitors or number of those visitors into rural areas in order to achieve so important sustainability. Meet cultural heritage, especially UNESCO sites and UNESCO. Here, of course, I have to mention material and immaterial, or tangible and intangible heritage. What we see on the photo is actually it's the oldest sailors brotherhood in Montenegro. It's in Boka Kotorska, so it's also on the list of intangible World Heritage of UNESCO since last year. But apart from this intangible, there are also some other intangible cultural heritage on the list of UNESCO, but also a very important material heritage is on the list of UNESCO, like Kotor, where our faculty is. We are actually situated in the old town, so the whole old town and that part of Boka Bay is also under UNESCO protection. Eat like a local. Gastronomy is always an important part of the local experience. So here we can number a few aspects. One is production. Second one is protection of local recipes. Third could be interpretation and reinterpretation of heritage in sense of food and gastronomy in general. Apart from that, of course, I don't want to just talk about the nice things. So on the other side, we have some really big issues. First of all, over tourism in the coastal area that I already mentioned, and that's this percentage is quite disturbing. But taking into consideration the situation in other Mediterranean countries, starting with Spain or even France, Italy, and other countries, they have similar problem in the coastal area. But for small economy of Montenegro, this is extremely high concentration of tourism in the coastal part. But that's not the whole problem. Other aspects is also seasonality. So we have two aspects: space and time. So in that small space, or we only have 300 kilometers of the coast. So Montenegro, you probably know its position. Montenegro has a little bit more than 500,000 inhabitants, so it's a relatively small country. But it also has a relatively short coast. So what we have, that coast is actually the most important resource. So we are dealing with big problems that we can name as over-tourism in general. There is another interesting challenge. That's a cruising tourism in Kotor. I mentioned Kotor, so the place under UNESCO, place where our faculty is, and place that is visited by many cruisers. After Venice and Dubrovnik, Kotor is the third most visited cruising destination. And you know that in analyzing cruisers, you can make both pros and cons, or positive and negative. But of course, the crowd and traffic congestions are some of the most visible negative impacts. But we don't have, we are not supposed to forget other environmental impacts of the big cruisers in such a small and narrow bay. Then coastal pollution, waste management, and poverty is still a significant issue, especially in northern part of the country. So when we take into consideration that in the south part we have a quite luxurious and quite developed area, and on the north part of Montenegro we have something that we can say maybe opposite to that. Then we have a disbalance, and that's actually it's also big issue in terms of sustainability. Finally, conclusions and some key guidelines for sustainable tourism development from our perspective, but I believe that these guidelines also could be relevant for other Mediterranean destinations and tourism destinations in general. First of all, sustainable tourism development requires the participation of all relevant stakeholders, especially in tourism, because tourism really includes and encompasses a great deal of different stakeholders and important from product and service operators to many others, including visitors as well. Sustainable tourism then needs strong political leadership to ensure wide participation and consensus building. That's of course that political aspect is not discussed much today, but maybe through questions we can talk about that. Sustainable tourism development is a continuous process, not a campaign or project or something. So we need really need dedication, and in terms of that, we need political leadership that's actually will in some way support, but in long term, of course. Sustainable tourism requires constant monitoring of impacts and introducing the necessary preventive and corrective measures. Sustainable tourism should maintain a high level of tourism satisfaction. We can't develop sustainable tourism that produces dissatisfaction. So we don't want dissatisfied tourists. So that's quite maybe could be better understood when we mention the next guideline that is sustainable tourism should ensure a meaningful experience to the tourists. I mentioned a few examples of those so-called meaningful experiences because today tourism is mostly dealing with experiences, not anymore just services or just products. I already mentioned agritainment. Just the term agritainment as something that's generated from agriculture and entertainment is in some way explains what experience or servitization in agriculture means for rural economies and rural societies. And also sustainable tourism should raise tourist awareness about sustainability issues and promote sustainable tourism practices among them. So sustainable tourism in some way has some capacity of self-curing, if I may say, like that, where it can spread good practices among tourists just by itself. But of course, we need to create sustainable tourism and sustainable tourism practices and products if we want to spread them among and promote them among visitors. And of course, last but not the least, sustainable tourism development must go hand in hand with strategies that improve health, education, reduce inequality and poverty, and economic growth. This is quite important because in economies like our economy, where tourism is dominant, occasionally other elements of sustainability like no poverty, no inequality, and other need for education and safety and health and so on are sometimes marginalized. So tourism, yes, but sustainable tourism has to be part of course, general sustainability in economy, society, and in also environmental issues. If you need some more information about the topics I mentioned, you can visit this these sites. Of course, Montenegro.travel, UNVTO, and UN sites that we can find some aspects of sustainable tourism. And thank you very much. And I hope for success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ilya, for this excursion of how sustainability can impact tourism heritage. One question was popping up. How impactful could sustainable tourism be for, let's say, countries of the Southern Hemisphere, like African countries, to strengthen the tourism there, the local communities? Are there also some like projects between Montenegro and other countries in respect of that question?
Yeah, you know, cultural heritage is important tourism resource. Cultural heritage is important as a part of identity. Cultural heritage is, in every sense, is actually a resource. So, and it's authentic. Maybe authenticity could be, and authenticity is nowadays one of the most demanding products. So every culture, even South, even in Europe, even East and West, that authenticity is now quite demanding. And what we are trying, for example, in Montenegro, and I think those experiences could be important for other developing countries, is actually to preserve that authenticity. But I'm afraid it's not an easy process. It's a long-term process. It needs a lot of effort, a lot of, again, political leadership. It needs certain strategies, but real applicable strategies and tactics. So that's something. Especially, for example, now when I'm thinking about that, I have to mention intangible cultural heritage. That's maybe the most authentic. We can talk about material heritage that's in the parts of Europe is maybe identical or similar thanks to big cultures that actually moved across Europe and left their artifacts on the east-west of Europe. But in sense of some intangible, especially in parts of knowledge, art, and other things, that's very important. But on the other side, it's very complex to preserve it. It's very complex to preserve it from disappearing, first of all. And second, it's very complex to package it as a product, tourism product, in some sustainable way. So that's a great issues. Many now, of course, I intentionally open many questions, but I believe that the answer is in authenticity, protection of that, and valorization through tourism, first of all, but through and via other sustainable activities.
Thanks. There is not much time left. Time is flying, as always, very fast, but maybe a last question to all of you regarding how deeply are you involved into, let's call it open science, citizen science applications, citizen education. I guess it's a really easy question for Dominic, so maybe you start, but it's also interesting, like for AMAC or for the University of Montenegro, if there are some projects going on at the moment.
If I may, I take this suggestion and start. Currently, I design a project for the so-called Umweltbildungsprogramm in order to raise awareness for the teenage age pupils of Tyrol. And it's about plastic waste and microplastic and nanobead issues. I further engaged at the BFE in the adult educational sector. There I train the Abfallbeauftragten Personen, which is an expression of the Austrian government, of course. And I engage in a new, quite large project there, which is not yet presentable, but it will be soon, hopefully during the next 3 or 4 months. Fact is, if you take sustainability serious, you have to start with children. and you have to see the long-term processes. So I also do education in organizations. I normally do it via speeches or via small projects. And the one educational project I now create for the Umweltbildungsprogramm, I will ask, but I want to offer this especially for corporations and organizations as well, in order to make the employees understand why plastic waste should be avoided instead of recycling. So that's quite an important thing, to reduce the amount of waste in general. And even though those things are not paid very well, I like to do them because I see the importance of it. And I have two children of my own. They are very young yet and now, and I hope they will grow into a sustainable future and not in the current situation we have. So.
Thanks, Dominic. What's about AMAC? Are there projects on the way to involve children, citizens in respect to sustainability?
Yeah, so I'm part of the environmental and energy management, but we work close with the sustainability department. And over the year, there are also some different projects for example, to visit AMAC at night, or there is a path in the AMAC forest you can book. And so we also try to to inform our environment about the importance of this topic, and a lot of communication is happening between our customers regarding our sustainability activity.
Thanks, Lisa. And what about the University of Montenegro?
Yeah, university, you know, the activity of university is defined by our legal documents. So we are mostly focused on our students. So for the last, and I agree with this thesis that there is no sustainability if we don't start with the children, and the students are also in some very, very important part of that process. So for example, in the last few years, we had several projects where we invested a lot of effort to adapt the curricula and subjects that we are teaching. For example, social impacts of tourism is a subject that is taught on the first year of our bachelor studies. We didn't have it before, and we are dealing, for example, with the issues that are related to women in tourism, poverty, disabilities, and accessible tourism, and other issues. But that's not just one. It's actually there is a lot of changes in the curricula, so we are actually trying to changing and adapting the programs, especially for also on the master level. We are trying indirectly to influence the problems that you mentioned, challenges in the society regarding to poverty, children, and so on. Of course, we are other projects, because we have very good cooperation with the business sector. We have certain projects dedicated to the environmental issues, especially waste disposal, that I already mentioned as a critical in Montenegro. We are involved in such, but again, you know, university is defined. Activities of university are defined as research and teaching and similar activities. So via those activities, we hope to enhance the whole global and local situation.
Great, thank you. So it remains to say a big thanks to all the speakers again. We really appreciated your contribution. I think it's a very important topic, and it was also a pleasure for me to moderate and to guide through this webinar. And a big thanks also to Elena and her team for all the technical support. Everything went fine, perfectly. And to all of you, hope you have enjoyed, and stay safe and sound. And yeah, have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.